In its simplest form, speedrunning is the process of whittling away at a game. Players do as much as they can, as fast as they can, to disrupt the natural order of things. Sometimes, these tricks are like a small paring knife, and other times, these glitches are like a chainsaw. Even the best-made games have their flaws, some more apparent than others. We've looked under every rock and boulder for this one. The runners of this game have walked through fire and lived to tell the tale. The wise sages of yesteryear have shared what they've learned. Don't pause, you might miss something. This is the story of Jak and Daxter, the Precursor Legacy. Today, we're looking at the any percent category. Anything goes in these parts. Hold on, things are about to pick up. Welcome to Speed Dogs. Released on December 3rd, 2001 for the PlayStation 2, Jak and Daxter, or simply Jak 1, was the first entry in what would become a hallmark franchise for Naughty Dog. This game would help define an era of 3D platformers on the PS2, such as Ratchet & Clank, Sly Cooper, and Ape Escape. The story follows Jak and his pal Daxter. Daxter is turned into a fuzzy, orange creature called an Ottsel. In an attempt to return Daxter back to normal, Jak must confront Gull, the Dark Eco Sage. Along the way, Jak and Daxter must activate the teleporter for Blue Eco Sage's hut in Hub 2 and the Red Eco Sage's teleporter in Hub 3 to progress through the game. Each of these sages has a cutscene the player must watch to unlock more areas of the game. To progress further into the game, Jak and Daxter must collect power cells throughout the world. This requirement for power cells is a lot like Mario collecting stars in Super Mario 64. Their adventures will take them to Geyser Rock, Fire Canyon, Rock Village, Volcanic Crater, Snowy Mountain, Spider Cave, Lava Tube, the Citadel, and more. Jak must collect 4 power cells in Geyser Rock to leave the tutorial level, 20 power cells to upgrade the heat shield on the zoomer to get through Fire Canyon, 45 power cells to power the Eco Machine to move the boulder, and 72 power cells to get through Lava Tube to reach the Citadel. The game has a number of safeguards in place to make sure that you don't progress through the game without the required number of power cells. For example, trying to go through Fire Canyon on foot causes the player to be bounced back to the start. Trying to walk through Lava Tube will kill Jak in fairly short order. They don't call it Lava Tube for nothing. Power cells can be earned in many different ways, such as fighting enemies, performing tasks for other characters, and completing platform challenges. Precursor orbs are egg-shaped collectibles scattered throughout the world, some in plain sight, and some hidden out of view. Additionally, there are 7 scout flies in each level. Collecting all 7 in each level will reward the player with a power cell. There are 3 main bosses in the game: the Dark Eco Plant in Forbidden Jungle, the Evil Claw at the end of Rock Village, and Golan Maya's Precursor robot at the top of the Citadel. You technically don't have to beat the Dark Eco Plant, but you do have to beat Claw and the Acheron siblings in order to beat the game. The player is also able to utilize eco powers by collecting small amounts of glowing eco particles, or getting a full charge through eco vents. Green eco restores health and is the most abundantly available. Blue eco increases Jak's speed, breaks nearby boxes, and attracts precursor orbs and scout flies. Red eco increases Jak's attack power, while yellow eco allows Jak to shoot ranged bursts of energy through his hands. Dark eco exists in the game as an obstacle for players to avoid. Light eco is the combination of all eco, but it's only used to kill the final boss of the game. The game ends once you free the 4 sages held captive in the citadel and defeat the Acheron siblings. Without further ado, let's get started. Our story starts as many of our other stories do, Speed Demos Archive, the fire which almost all speedrunners and enthusiasts gathered around in the 2000s. For as many completed runs uploaded to the website, there are as many vague threats of speedruns in the forums that never amounted to anything. It's important to point out that from the outside looking in, Jak and Daxter does not look ideal for speedrunning. You have the power cell requirements which make sequence breaks impossible. You know what else Jak 1 has a lot of? Cutscenes. Complete the tutorial? There's a cutscene for that. Talk to an NPC in the game? There's a cutscene for that. Meeting one of the sages for the first time? There's a cutscene for that. Do anything of significance? Guess what? There's a cutscene for that too. And the icing on the cake is that you can't skip any of them. This makes for a great casual experience, but it makes routing a speedrun akin to watching a movie. It's hard to go over the speed limit if there's a speed bump at every mile marker. This is why speedrunning Jak and Daxter didn't appear as appealing as some other games. After years of forum threads that never went anywhere, someone would finally make good on their speedrun promises. Ben Fichter, aka MKT 2015, submitted their segmented 80% run of 2 hours, 20 minutes, and 3 seconds on February 14th, 2005. Happy Valentine's Day, Ben. A segmented run means that the speedrun was recorded in multiple parts, and later assembled together to tally a final time. Ben found a game he wanted to see a run for, and decided to make it a reality. However, his run is far from perfect. Let's first take a look at his submission notes. I wish Jak and Daxter could have been beaten as fast as Super Mario 64. Less than an hour and a half isn't possible. Less than 2 hours isn't possible. I couldn't jump into magical pictures to save time. The world of Jak and Daxter acts like an actual world with almost no load times between places. Another thing is Jak and Daxter doesn't have glitches that would allow me to skip sequences. Ben's route is focused on getting all of the power cells in the first hub of the game because these power cells are comparatively easier than some of the cells later in the game. He also skips Spider Cave because he didn't remember how to get any of the power cells there, and also because he hates spiders. Ugh.
Right. Sounds like a real cheery place. Let me guess. There are spiders in the Spider Caves, right?
The lack of game knowledge on how to get some of the power cells could be overlooked if this was a single segment speedrun, but it isn't. This meant that the segments were not all performed at the same time, and that it would have been possible to learn parts of the run and practice them more. Ben did 3 attempts per segment. This run was performed in 8 segments, but the game didn't properly load him back into the correct locations as it would if he were doing a proper single segment run. This meant that there are sections of the run where he has to walk back to the start of the segment he's meant to be on. This is essentially just free time save. In Ben's defense, one of the challenges of recording any speedrun back in the day was physical media. Today, it's easy. You start up a stream and boom, you have a recording of your video that's uploaded already. Such was not the case in 2005. Most people recorded their runs on VHS tapes. One of the limitations of VHS was that you'd wear out your tape by constantly recording over it. This means that you can't do hundreds of attempts because you'd render the tape inert. This limitation led to some of the greatest speedruns on SDA, and this Jak and Daxter run.
The one thing I do know about Ben Fichter is his run was word of mouth, because the people that knew about Ben Fichter's run were the people that were around all the way back in the day. When I came around the scene, Zenic Reverie's run on SDA was the most recent addition, because his run was 80%, but it was segmented. Zenic's run was a single segment 80% run, but it was faster. So what they do on SDA is they overwrite that run. So a lot about that run was word of mouth. So I really don't know anything about the specifics, but I do know that to this day, that run gets roasted for its hilarious comments of being afraid of spiders and just not being very good overall. It was a start, but yeah, it was rough around the edges for sure.
Despite people calling the quality of his run into question, Ben fervently defended it for years, going so far as to doubt anyone could improve it by 5 minutes. Even with all the things this run had working against it, Ben's time stood unopposed for more than 4 years. This was mainly because nobody else was trying, but let's not rain on Ben's parade. In 2009, a new runner appeared in a thread long thought to be dormant. Zenik Reverie had made a post that he was considering attempting a single segment run of Jak and Daxter, in between working on his segmented Vandal Hearts run. One of the major driving forces for Zenik was to have a single segment run with no deaths. In his initial few posts in the thread, Zenik has a pretty good idea on how to optimize and save time over Ben. After just his very first practice run, Zenik was matching Ben's segmented time. Let's see how he did it. For starters, Zenik disabled the in-game hints in the option menu before the run. In Geyser Rock, the game stops you to teach you basic game information. By turning these in-game prompts off, Zenik instantly saved 2 minutes over Ben. Zenik also prioritized his movement and spacing. By doing more roll jumps and punches throughout the game, Zenik was saving several minutes on Ben from better movement overall. Let us not forget Zenik's greatest advantage over Ben. Zenik did not suffer from arachnophobia, which allowed him to enter the Spider Cave. Spider Cave has a few very fast power cells that are definitely worth getting in the interest of time. So how much time did Zenik save? Ben predicted nobody could shave 5 minutes off his time. Ben was right. Zenik didn't save 5 minutes. Zenik saved 39 minutes and 52 seconds. Zenik got his deathless single segment run with the final time of 1:40:11 on April 26, 2009. As with all games during this time period, new world records weren't happening left and right, and it would be another few years before business picked up again for Jak and Daxter.
Like, while Jak 1 was a very popular game and a very sold game for the time, I don't feel like it kind of blew people away in the same vein as, like, SM64 or other platformers of the era, which it just has this like very explosive movements with these crazy glitches. Like in 2012, Jak 1 was very glitch free. Like, there were very, very, very few glitches found for the game. And also, the game had a load of unskippable cutscenes, which again just isn't, for a platforming game, isn't going to click very well with a lot of people. Like, a load of cutscenes in a platforming game just completely kills the pace of the whole game. And so Jak 1 was kind of like, I wouldn't say doomed, but there was low hopes for the game at first to be as great of a game as it was. So I remember a lot of people, like, in the early days of the community, would run Jak 2 or Jak 3 instead, despite those games being less sold and maybe less memorable for the time. They had more consistent, fast-paced action with skippable cutscenes and more glitches at their disposal, and bigger, huge sequence breaks, which were more flashy and kind of like, were more appealing to like new runners getting into speedrunning as a whole.
Towards the end of 2012, a loose community had begun to take shape, with members like Zeppelins, Ricky, Bloppy, and Roser. Most of these players would race frequently on Speedruns Live, without taking the game all that seriously. Zeppelins was the most invested Jak 1 player at the time, and would do attempts of the game outside of just racing. On November 5th, 2012, Zeppelins took the record with the time of 1:32:22.
No! Where is it? There! There! Get it! Get it! Get it! Oh my god! Yes! I fucking did it! Oh my god! Oh my god! Oh, I am spent.
How was he able to save 8 minutes so easily? Zeppelins utilized a new way of skipping the opening cutscene, which would become the new standard. By beginning a new game, then resetting the console, you create a 0% save file that doesn't have to watch the opening cinematic. Both Ben and Zenek were forced to watch the opening 6-minute long cutscene where Samus, the Green Sage, waxes poetic about the plants and the rocks and the bones in his body. Then Daxter gets turned into a naked orange rodent. Another massive skip Zeppelins found was the ability to skip the entirety of Gol and Maya's citadel. Right before the final boss fight, the player has to rescue the 4 sages from captivity in the citadel. If you watch the cutscene where Samus tells you to rescue the 4 sages, you can save and load the game. When the game loads back in, you'll be at the top of the citadel with 3 of the 4 sages rescued. All that's left is to rescue Samus, who's right in front of you, and then you can head to the final boss. Skipping the citadel saves players 5.5 minutes. This trick only works on some Black Label versions of the game, and most Platinum versions of the game for the PS2. It doesn't work on PS3, but it does work on NTSC 1.0 and PAL versions of PS4.
When you enter the Citadel, Samos comes down and says you've got to free all the other sages and they'll be able to help you. So you've got 3 kind of trials, I guess. 1 for each of the sages, the red sage, the blue sage, and the yellow sage. And once those are completed, a set of platforms rise out of the ground, and you use those to get up to the green sage to free him. And by doing this save and load trick, which is literally after the intro cutscene, on certain versions of the game, just save and then load, and you spawn right outside the green sage.
These 2 tricks saved around 11 minutes, so a world record was essentially free for anyone willing to put in the work. Zeppelins had gotten the record, but he technically hadn't beaten Zenek. Zenek's movement and technique were superior to Zeppelin's. Zeppelin's was only able to take the world record because of tricks that were unavailable to Zenek. So Zeppelin's got to work lowering his time down further to get the record, for real this time. A little over a month later, Zeppelin's had improved the world record time to a 1:30.25 on December 10th, and later to a 1:25.15 on December 19th.
Oh.
25:15.
Oh, nice. That's pretty damn nice.
Yeah,
I like
dude.
that. Congrats.
Thank you. Sorry.
This run was finally a run Zeppelins could be happy with. A run that incorporated the new time saves, while also being on par with Zenek on a technical level. Zeppelins also incorporated a decent amount of route changes, like not getting the power cells from the mayor in Sandover Village, and paying for all 4 minor power cells in Volcanic Crater. Zeppelins had also incorporated an exploit in Snowy Mountain that fellow PlayStation runner Surreal had discovered. Normally, Flut Flut, the flying horse parrot extraordinaire, is only exclusive to a small obstacle course where you traverse platforms. However, with some tricky jumps, you can bypass an invisible wall behind you and make Flut Flut accessible for the entire level. With a movement increase on Flut Flut and power cell animations being faster, this way of playing Snowy Mountain would become the standard. Another trick runners used in a separate category, any percent no save and load, was death warping. Dying allowed runners to respawn back at the entrance of an area faster. Up until this point, runners would return on foot to the beginning of the level. With a new trick to add into any percent, a new record was imminent. Around this time, there were a few people in the world record picture. Chief among them were Preer DF and Bonesaw. Yes, that Bonesaw. At some point between December 2012 and August 2013, Preer got a time of 1:16:09. We know that they got it because people saw it, but no video survives today. It's hard to say exactly what Preer did differently, but we can have a better idea based on the run that came after it. On August 27, 2013, Bonesaw would get a time of 1:15:49.
Fucking webcam. I'm gonna go to YouTube. I'm gonna fucking. Oh shit. I'm gonna fucking dance, dude. I'm gonna dance. You fucking think I can dance? Well, I can fucking dance. I'm gonna fucking dance.
With this run, we can more closely examine the things that had been implemented into the world record that saved nearly 10 minutes over Zeppelin's time. One of the largest optimizations in this run is the use of death warps to get out of levels faster. Not having to backtrack saved time throughout the run and allowed for more freedom with the route. As movement had become much more optimized over time, orb routing became more significant. Speckled throughout the world are precursor orbs which can be traded in for power cells. Deciding which orbs to get while making sure you end the run with the precise amount became pivotal for world record success. Let's take a quick detour to talk about Bonesaw. While most of the community had centralized around a new Skype and Mumble group, Bonesaw did not join them. Bonesaw was more of a lone wolf doing his own thing. This approach meant that he was improving his time on his own talent and willpower alone, but this also meant that he didn't have any help from the pack, an approach that worked for him in other games. Bonesaw is pretty good at this whole speedrunning thing.
But yeah, I've always seen Bonesaw as, like, after I was running the game, I realized that he just, I don't know, like, how much he practices and how much he puts time into runs, but I've always, like, respected him as being, like, a great streamer, right? More so than his speedrun skills. After I picked up Jak, like, I could still, like, watch his stream, and I think that's something he always did better than me, so I've always seen him as, like, he's a great speedrunner and streamer in his own right.
Bonesaw was implementing tricks and skips found by other community members, but he could only implement tricks as fast as other people performed them in runs. All that having been said, nobody can dispute Bonesaw was good at Jak and Daxter. It was only a few months after Bonesaw's 1:15:49 that a new slew of discoveries would help break Jak and Daxter even further. One of the things you'll notice about the movement in this run so far is that it's mostly horizontal. Players relied heavily on the roll jump to move faster and clear gaps. There was a distinct lack of vertical movement tech. Until now. An extended uppercut, or extended, is a movement technique that extends the distance of a conventional punch uppercut spin. This trick allowed Jak to reach places he otherwise couldn't and expanded the movement options greatly. At the time extendeds were discovered, they weren't fully perfected by the community. Performing the inputs for an extended resulted in an increase in Jak's horizontal and vertical distance. Sometimes, runners would get a normal extended uppercut, and other times they'd get a miniature one. Keep this in mind for later. Freak4Games discovered that by doing an extended uppercut to the left of the flaming boulder, you could do this.
Yes, I got it! Okay, hold on, don't say anything.
Soldier Hotline, my
shush. Okay, that is a way of skipping both the Kira cutscene there and the Blue Sage cutscene over in his hut, which I can't see from here. That will save about 2 seconds, and I'd like to thank Freak4Games for telling me about it. And then everything works fine. You can still trigger the Red Sage's cutscene.
Skipping the cutscene of Kira moving the boulder saved about 30 seconds, but this was also the first time a power cell requirement had been bypassed. Unfortunately, you still needed to collect 72 power cells to get through Lava Tube. This meant bypassing the 45 cell requirement didn't help all that much, but it did remove another cutscene from the speedrun. The game was starting to show signs of weakness. First by being able to skip certain cutscenes, and later by skirting around a power cell requirement. Maybe the game wasn't as impervious as runners once thought. Last but not least, Roser and Zeppelins found a way to skip the Green Sage cutscene. Runners were already skipping almost the entirety of the Citadel by saving and loading their way to the top. Once you were there, however, you still had to watch one last cutscene where Samus tells you to go fight Gol and Maya. Roser and Zeppelins found that if you kicked the container with the power cell, let the game autosave, and then restart your console, you could skip the Green Sage cutscene. This saved about 35 seconds. Armed with these time saves, Bonesaw would go on to lower the world record. Twice in one day, in fact. First, a 1:14:24, and then a 1:13:34 later on November 6th for good measure.
That's it, baby. We got it. Oh yeah! We fucking did it! Oh man! I can't believe we got it! Oh my god! I can't believe it, dude. I did one run, and I got a PB by 9 seconds, and then I was just like, fuck it, let's do it again. And we did it again, and the first try, we got world record. Holy shit.
Even though he was a lone wolf, it seemed like Bonesaw was still at the head of the pack. His main competition was with Preer, but there were others out there gaining on him too. Someone who was so inspired by watching Bonesaw that they decided to pick up the game themselves. That someone was Bill Braid.
I'm gonna see if I remember how to 100% this game, I think. Just for fun. I don't know, man.
2 days after Bonesaw's double feature matinee, Preer lowered the world record down to a 1:13.12. Preer added a few things into this run to give himself the edge, such as adding a death warp to the end of Lost Precursor City and another to the final boss fight found by the handsome young Ricky. Meanwhile, Bill was just getting his feet wet. Content on not grinding for world record, Bill wanted to speedrun Jak and Daxter because it looked like a fun pastime.
So I wanted something competitive that didn't involve lag, so I picked up speedrunning, and I grinded the hell out of Jak 1, and I didn't really look at any of my times or anything. I didn't practice, have a timer running during practice. I just watched streams and practiced. And then, yeah, I was like, there's no way I'm gonna ever compete with Bonesaw and Preer. And my first run was I think 30 seconds off of the top time at the time. And so I was like, damn, that's crazy.
Bill would frequent Bonesaw's chat to share what his new PB was, but Bonesaw was not all that interested. Preer would prove to be more supportive of Bill's early efforts. Bill's consistency and movement catapulted him into world record contention. The next few weeks would be a 3-horse race with Preer, Bill, and Bonesaw taking turns with the world record. This was highlighted by such runs as Bill's 1:13 flat on November 17th, Bonesaw's 1:12.45 on December 1st, and Bill's 1:12.26 on December 2nd.
Boom, that's it. Holy frick, man, that time. Jesus.
This was the first one cycle on clearing the Dark Eco plant and Precursor Basin in a run. This saves about 10 seconds over a well-executed 2 cycle. We mentioned before that at the time when extended uppercuts were discovered, they weren't fully understood. With multiple eyes looking at the trick, the up-and-coming Jak community was able to maximize its usage. Spacing out the inputs of a punch uppercut spin leads to more airtime. Doing these inputs too close together will result in a miniature extended. Bonesaw's decision to remain outside of the community meant this information wasn't communicated to him. This is one example of the disadvantage Bonesaw faced, and it reflected in his runs. Bonesaw would reclaim the world record with a 1:12.19 on December 3rd, 2013, but his reign would be short-lived. Later that same day, Bill took the record back with a 1:12.16. Despite being new to the scene, Billy the Kid was improving faster than the others could keep up. This would prove to be the end of Bonesaw. Try as they might, Bill was simply too consistent. Together, Bonesaw and Preer would fall to the wayside. Bonesaw's 1:12.19 would be the last time he PB'd in this category, as he chose to move on to other games. With Preer's interest in the category also waning, the onus of pushing the game was left to Bill. Starting on December 21st and continuing to the new year, Bill would push the record from a 1:12.16 to a 1:10.06. This was all the same route as before and used the same tricks. Over 2 minutes of time saved from pure optimization and personal improvement.
When you were watching Bill back in the day, it was very clear that this guy had some ungodly level of consistency to the game. I feel like a lot of the time, back in the day, there were a lot of speedruns, you still had well over a minute to save in these hour-long games and stuff like that. When you were watching Bill, he'd be saving 2 seconds, and then he'd lose 1 second, and then he'd save 5, and then lose 3. His time save and loss was not very it didn't fluctuate very much, which definitely meant that Bill had taken the level of play to a very high level and a very consistent level at that. I remember Bill often being in late game. I can recall Bill getting a PB or a record more than I can recall him failing, honestly. But maybe it's just because his stream overall was just so entrancing.
As the community's understanding of how extendeds worked grew, so did their utilization in speedruns. Bill had found more places where extendeds could be used to save more time. There was also a new innovation made for Green Sage cutscene skip. Runners used to restart their console to avoid the cutscene. As it turned out, pausing the game before the cutscene started would let the game autosave. Then you could just load the game and it would have the same effect. These things combined with the Death Warp and Boggy Swamp helped Bill lower his time down to a 109.06 on April 1st, 2014. But wait, there's more. In Snowy Mountain, it's possible to take Flut into the Lurker Fort. Usually, you have to do the Lurker Fort on foot, which is considerably slower than flying on Flut. With good spacing and quick movement, it was possible to beat the load-in of the fort's door. Timed right, you can walk right on through as the giant wooden door loads in behind you, saving roughly 30 seconds. As time went on, the runners would start to examine the route more closely. The game offers players carte blanche in terms of which power cells they collect and in what order, for the most part. This freedom allows for more interesting and creative routing changes over time. As long as you had enough power cells for each power cell requirement, you were free to do as you wished. This means that you could skip Spider Cave if you're afraid of spiders, like Ben Fichter, or reroute the entirety of Rock Village to save a few seconds like Bill. Bill would offer another volley of world records starting with a 109.02 and ending with a 106.32 in the summer of 2014. For more time to come off, more tricks would have to be found. But the Jak community has always been clever about finding new tech. Bill wasn't just doing runs. He also spent a lot of time in the lab looking at every power cell in each precursor orb. At one point, Bill knew how much time each orb saved and lost.
You have no idea how much time I've spent like just timing things in Jak 1. Like, it's absolutely insane. I made a spreadsheet of every like orb in the game and like how much time it would take to skip it. Like, so I would like say there's 4 orbs here. If I skip them, I save this much time by like going to pick them up as fast as I could and then coming back and then like doing that again where I cut it out, right? So it's just like insane amounts of time spent on the game.
In Lost Precursor City, there are a bunch of cells that take a long time to get. This meant that runners weren't getting too many cells in this area. For example, there's a room at the bottom of the city called the Dark Eco Rising Room. Players go all the way down to this room to grab a power cell, but be careful, it's a trap. As the room fills with Dark Eco, you have to go all the way back to the surface, where you can collect another power cell. Those 2 power cells took an incredibly long time just in walking alone. It was discovered by Bill that you could get out of bounds in this room in Lost Precursor City. 2 enemies nearby are riding piggyback. By getting on top of their heads and then doing a high jump, it's possible to clip out of bounds since many older games did not extend walls up very high. This trick was aptly named Piggyback Clip. Since the player could get out of bounds, they could get to the room where the second power cell is that you would get from escaping the Rising Dark Eco Room. The one of the Rising Dark Eco Room was still off limits for now, but access to another quick power cell was warmly welcomed. Extended uppercuts also took another step forward. As it turned out, it was possible to translate the extra height that Jak would get from an extended uppercut into horizontal distance. This trick is called a boosted extended uppercut, or boosted for short. To put it simply, boosteds are a game changer. Discovered by Megachili, it's possible to line yourself up on an edge so that Jak's feet are pointing down in his animation. By performing the inputs for an extended uppercut, you can clear larger distances. Another runner, Sir Jazzberry, had been doing boosteds in their runs, but they were a little finicky. It was later discovered that you could perform the same trick by slowly walking off a ledge, which is the most consistent method and is how Bill implemented the trick into his runs. Bill used these time saves to get a 106.28 on October 19th, and later a 106 flat on November 13th. Let's go back to the Rising Dark Eco room. Runners can't go down to the bottom and back up on foot because that's too slow. They can go out of bounds to get the power cell you receive for escaping the room. But what about that last cell? It's just laying there for the taking. How do we go about getting that one? In the last section of Lost Precursor City, there's a room off to the side with a slide that goes down to the bottom of the city. By getting onto these air vents that are on the platforms, you can use the momentum from the air vent to jump over the wall. This lets you get out of bounds and go straight to where the power cell is. This method bypasses the Rising Dark Eco and also avoids the checkpoint at the bottom of the slide. If the player lets the game autosave and then load, they'll find themselves above ground, one power cell richer. As you've no doubt seen from this video, when Jak and Daxter collect a power cell, they do a little animation to celebrate. Up until now, there was no way to skip these animations. In Snowy Mountain, inside the fortress, there's a power cell on a tiny platform. If you jump from above, turn the camera, and land on the cell, it skips the animation. Unfortunately, this only works for this specific power cell. Bill used these time saves to lower the record down to a 105.47 on November 22nd. By this point, the community had grown and the Skype group had expanded to be close to 40 runners strong. There were more people playing the Jak trilogy than ever before. This meant more eyes on the game and more people searching for ways to save even more time. The game was eroding away in real time. Despite the influx of new blood, one thing remained a constant. Bill was still the best, but even Bill wasn't immune to the game's mini cutscenes. One of the many cutscenes in Jak and Daxter is the Blue Sage cutscene. When you first get to Rock Village, the Blue Sage's hut sits near the entrance. In order to activate the zoomer for Precursor Basin and Flet Flood in Boggy Swamp, you have to watch the Blue Sage cutscene. A runner named Sultra99 found that if you go down to Precursor Basin and get a checkpoint before going to the Blue Sage's hut, you can press the button that activates the cutscene, pause the game before the cutscene starts, and save and load the game. The game thinks you've seen the Blue Sage cutscene and allows you to progress further, thanks to this skip. Skipping the Sage cutscene in this way leaves a cutscene bubble around the hut, which will activate the cutscene if you get too close. By getting the checkpoint from Precursor Basin, players could avoid the bubble and keep making progress. This cutscene skip saved 15 to 25 seconds. For the first time in over a year, someone other than Bill would hold the world record. Sultra, who had discovered Blue Sage cutscene skip, got a 105.33 on December 16th. Nearly 2 weeks later, Sultra would eke out a 20-second improvement with a 105.13 on New Year's Eve. Unlike Bill, Sultra could not have gotten the world record without Blue Sage cutscene skip. Sultra had beaten Bill to the punch, but there was no reason to doubt that Bill would be back to reclaim the record in the new year. It was not a question of if, it was a matter of when.
Oh, amazing eco spawn for once in my life. I did it, guys. I beat my goal. Yes. Damn. I'm so happy.
By implementing Blue Sage cutscene skip into his runs, Bill got a 104.53 and a 104.28 just days later. Bill would take breaks and play other games. Bill really likes him some Tekken, but he would return and push the game further than anyone else could. Several new runners had joined the community during Bill's benevolent reign of splendor, including Sir Jazzberry and Headstrong 1290. Jazz and Headstrong were coming into their own as Jak and Daxter speedrunners, but they were not good enough to contend for the world record just yet.
When I met Headstrong, we both had like 113 or something. And we raced like every day for like a year. It was good. It was good for both of us because we were at like the same skill level and we both had very similar improvement rates. So what we would do is we would talk a lot and we would just race a lot. And we raced like most days, I think for like a year.
We've talked about a lot of time saves and cutscene skips so far. What started off as Jak and Daxter the motion picture has come into focus as a bona fide speedrun. All of the cutscenes that the community had managed to skip saved a lot of time and would slowly turn the run into a really slick speed game. Even with most of the cutscenes removed, there was an elephant in the room. One cutscene that eluded their pursuit. The community was after the big one, the white whale. Red Sage cutscene skip. In Volcanic Crater, you need to watch the Red Sage cutscene in order to access the gondola to Snowy Mountain. It's also important that the game makes you go get 2 power cells after the cutscene plays before it'll unlock the gondola. This cutscene is awful. It's almost 3 minutes long in the middle of the speedrun. The hallmark of a great speedrun is not how many bathroom breaks it includes. But one day, a breakthrough happened. Bill had found a solution. By going over to Lava Tube, you can perform a trick called a rocket uppercut. When Jak uppercuts into specific terrain, it will launch Jak straight up with the momentum of the uppercut. You can rocket uppercut on this track to get sent up into the ceiling. If Jak zooms, the game treats Jak as if he's in a walking state, which allows you to unzoom and stay up where you've launched yourself. You can then do an extended uppercut over a wall to get out of bounds next to Lava Tube. Walking out of bounds allows you to go back in bounds with a checkpoint for Lava Tube. You can now walk back to Volcanic Crater, even though the game thinks you're in Lava Tube. You can then hit this button and pause, then save and load the game. The game will load you back in Lava Tube after an unusually long load screen. The cutscene bubble is still active. Entering the cutscene bubble will cause the cutscene to play. By intentionally dying, but turning the camera right before you die, the cutscene will start to play. Little black bars appear on the top and bottom of the game. The dying and respawning sequence takes place at the same time as the cutscene is playing out. When you respawn, the cutscene stops. Since the game only checks if the cutscene has started to tell if you've watched it, the cutscene bubble is no longer there, which skips the Red Sage cutscene. You are now free to roam Volcanic Crater. This convoluted series of events will save you 1 minute. This was a huge deal. The most hated cutscene in the entire game just got skipped.
At the time, Red Sage was huge because that cutscene's 2.5 minutes long, and it was just always such a meme and whatnot, just like sitting in that cutscene for like ever, just so you could get up to Snowy and continue to get the rest of the power cells. And then after Bill found that, me and Jazz practiced the heck out of it and just started doing runs.
With a 1 minute time save at their disposal, world record was now suddenly within reach of Jazz and Headstrong. Jazz struck first with a 104.27 on February 5th, 2015, and Headstrong followed with a 104.25 2 days later. Jazz had barely taken the world record by a second, and Headstrong by only 2 seconds on top of that.
Yeah, and then at this point, this 104.27 that I got, so Red Sage skip gets found, and Headstrong and I are pretty close. We're probably like a minute-ish skill level-wise behind Bill still, but we're pretty up there, and this gets found, and I just learned it and then just sniped this man's record out from under him real quick. Yeah, just for a little bit, just for like 2 days before Headstrong proceeded to borrow it for another few days.
The two had staked their claim for the record, but now it was Bill's turn. 14 months after his original world record, Bill started up a run of Jak and Daxter any percent. By now, Bill was more than capable of handling Geyser Rock. As he puts it himself,
I just feel like I need to update my run. Like, it's weird, it's not even old, but it needs to be updated.
After heading into Misty Island 5 seconds behind, Bill starts making up time before a big 15-second gold in Fire Canyon. With Bill's hundreds of hours of experience, all the things you expect turn out beautifully. Piggyback clip, aced it. Clip to the bottom of Lost Precursor City, you know it. Blue Sage cutscene skip, of course. The splits look like the run is unraveling, but it's just a route change that took place since his last PB. The rent comes due after Snowy Mountain, where Bill finds himself ahead with an obscene 56-second gold split. Is that not enough? How about another 40-second gold split on Lava Tube? As if his late game heroics weren't enough, he gets a gold split on the final boss too. His final time, 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 29 seconds.
Good spot. Oh yeah, sub 103.30. I'm content with that run. I think I'm gonna go back to 100% now. Man.
This run was a real spectacle. Not only did Bill get a 103, he shattered expectations. With the tricks and skips available to him at the time, this run was nearly perfect. Time makes fools of us all, but at the time this run was performed, there was zero doubt that Bill was on a whole new level. Unfortunately, nothing gold can stay. Bill had been speedrunning Jak and Daxter for over a year, and the grind had taken its toll. For as much time as Bill spent running the game, he spent an equal amount of time routing or testing new tech. After his insane time, Bill decided to step away from speedrunning and streaming altogether.
Yeah, I was just like really burnt out, I guess. I think that makes sense. It's just like over that long of a period of time and just like how fast the game was evolving. Because I remember when I first found Red Sage cutscene skip, people were finding the craziest shit, like trying to make it more optimized and stuff. And I was just like, you know what? It's just like, it's my time. It's my time to just go. Because well, speedrunning to me, I thought about it more like after I had stopped playing. And it's such a crazy thing because it's like, it's so good when you're doing well, when you're like a competitive person like me. It's so good when you're splitting and you're like getting gold splits and you're getting green splits and you're like, man, I'm improving. But when you're hitting red splits, it feels like just as bad. Like it feels awful. And it's just like, if I'm not playing at my absolute best, I'm not having fun.
With Bill gone, there was a void left behind. By losing Bill, the community didn't just lose one of its best runners. It lost something much more than that.
At this time, it would have been just me and Jazz. Sultra was like there-ish still, but not really. Sultra wasn't really playing the game very much, but me and Jazz were still playing a ton. And then I just kind of took it and ran with it.
Bill had left to go back to his first love, fighting games. Reuniting with the warm embrace of Tekken, the opportunity for someone else to push the world record had been created. Jazz, Headstrong, and Sultra had all previously held the record, but that was more because of timing. But after Bill's magical 103 run, Jazz and Headstrong had gotten 103s of their own, and this time it wasn't a fluke. Their skills had improved to where Bill had left off, but they had to push it one step further. If you're gonna be the champ, you gotta beat the champ. Out of the 3 players that had a shot at the record, one was more motivated than ever. Sultra had slowly started to fade away from the game, and Jazz was burning out too. This left only Headstrong to take the game to new heights. What Headstrong had over the competition was the amount of hours she was willing to spend on grinding out runs in practice. Even with daily streams on her Twitch channel, it wasn't uncommon for her to be practicing offline a lot too. With her time and dedication, Headstrong would capture the world record a few months after Bill's 103.29, with a time of 103.13 on May 6th. This was the first time since 2013 that there was a runner who was really better than Bill, and she was the first person to dethrone one of the old guards. This run had all the polish and panache of a Bill Braid run. Headstrong had a little help from a new trick too, puzzle skip.
That 103.13 was, well, it had like a few new things in it. It was definitely like, for me, like the run of the time. It was the first time that well, for one, Bill's time had been broken in 3 months. Like, Bill had been reigning for so long outside of the random, like, glitch findings that the 103.13 was the first time where anyone, like, actually beat Bill.
In Lost Precursor City, there's a floor puzzle with platforms that light up when you land on them. Landing on them twice causes them to stop glowing. It's not an inherently difficult puzzle. Going towards the edge of the platform causes the platform to shake. If you perform a high jump while the platform is shaking, it's possible to go over the top of the wall to where the power cell is, and collect it without solving the puzzle. This trick, discovered by Pickleberry, saves 11 seconds and is another welcome out of bounds added to the run. Besides the game's power cell requirement, the game's major pain point was all of the cutscenes. Many skips took almost as long to perform as the cutscene would take anyways. Something was about to be discovered that would change all that. While looking for a Kira cutscene skip at the end of Lava Tube, runner Bloppy had found that pressing R2 at the same time as pressing pause caused the delayed pause menu. Bloppy then used it on the portal and noticed it delayed the cutscene as well. This is pause buffer. By hitting pause and L2 or R2 on the same frame, the game will put you into a state for 2.5 seconds where the game is essentially paused but not paused. You can still move around during that 2.5 second time frame until the game actually pauses. Pause buffering is really easy to do and can be performed anywhere. Pause buffering effectively makes runners immune to cutscenes. This development had several significant implications. It was mainly because nobody else pause buffer was trying, but let's not rain on Ben's parade. For starters, Zenic disabled the in-game Blue Sage cutscene skip originally meant having to go down to Precursor Basin and back. Now you do a quick save and load, then a pause buffer to get out of the cutscene trigger bubble. This saves 30 seconds over the old method. Red Sage cutscene skip involved a lengthy process of rocket uppercutting, out-of-bounds tiptoeing, and checkpoint fustigating your way between Volcanic Crater and Lava Tube. Now you just pause buffer before hitting the button, hit the button, leave the Red Sage's hut, and hop into the lava. Doing this skips the long-winded setup and saves a whopping 90 seconds. At the end of Lava Tube, there's a cutscene where Kira explains that all the sages have been taken. You can skip this cutscene by doing a pause buffer before hitting the button and jumping in the lava. This skips the Kira cutscene and saves 40 seconds. Last of all, runners had been doing a save and load at the start of Citadel for as long as the rocks can remember. Now, you can pause buffer, go to where the cutscene is, and then die. This skips the cutscene, as well as having to save and load the game. This cutscene skip saves 60 seconds. Oh, and by the way, almost all of these tricks were discovered and implemented in one day. Pause buffering was a neutron bomb going off, and any percent was ground zero. Armed with over 3.5 minutes of time save, Headstrong was well positioned to take the game down lower. The question was, how far could the time be pushed? Headstrong got a 1:01:18 on May 18th, followed by a 1:0:26 on May 21st, and a 1:0:05 on May 22nd. Sub-hour went from being a distant fantasy to being right on her front doorstep.
Well, Headstrong is definitely one of my best friends, and she is balls to the wall when it comes to speedrunning. She doesn't have, like, I think her biggest strength probably is she has like no fear. No fear when it comes to speedrunning, and it scares me, honestly. It still scares me to this day. She's like insane. Her weakness is definitely like her consistency, and she knows that. She'll tell you that. She tries everything, and that is her strength, and she will get good at everything.
With a sum of best of 58:37, Headstrong knew the sub-hour run was inevitable. After some bad fishing RNG put Headstrong behind by 19 seconds, this could have been a reset point. Headstrong kept her composure and pressed on. By Fire Canyon, Headstrong still hasn't made any time back, but all hope is not lost. Headstrong has plenty of time to save in Precursor Basin and Lost Precursor City. Cutting the deficit in half, Headstrong heads for the underwater city. To wind up ahead, Headstrong will need to be pretty close to her gold here. Puzzle skip, piggyback clip, and the Rising Dark Eco power cells go off without a hitch. This blazing speed puts her back in the green, 0.3 seconds ahead. With time to save in Boggy Swamp, Headstrong improves her lead to 11 seconds before heading to Claw. Dispensing Claw with ease, we're on the home stretch. Maintaining her lead through Mountain Pass and Spider Cave, a misstep on Snowy Mountain loses her more than 7 seconds. Is the run falling apart? Is this the run that'll be remembered as almost being the sub-hour? Headstrong emerges from Lava Tube 17.6 seconds ahead. All that stands in her way is the final boss fight. This fight doesn't have to be perfect, but to be sub-hour, she can't lose more than a few seconds. Headstrong had done it, the first time anyone had beaten Jak and Daxter in under an hour, a 59:56 on May 24th, 2015.
So there's a few things with this run, as well as the run before it. Because after pause buffering was found, we weren't quite 100% sure if sub 1 was possible until I got the 1 flat 26. Then we're like, it's definitely possible. When I got the 1 flat 05, that was the most frustrating thing of all time. Because that run should have been it. And it took 2 days of attempt to finally get it after that. And it was very frustrating days because it was like, it was so close and we just wanted it to happen and it just was not happening. And then it finally happened. We finally got the sub 1 after those 2 days of just heavy grinding.
I was there. I remember exactly where I was when sub 1 happened. I was on my way to school. I was about to leave for school, actually. It was like 5 a.m. for me. And I was just sitting. I was so tired, but I was like, oh my God, she's on pace. Like, I have to watch. And so here I am, watching the sub 1 as it unfolds. And I remember having a very good day at school that day. So.
Oh, and by the way, the first ever sub 1 happened on my birthday. Thank you very much for that, Headstrong. Best birthday present ever. First ever sub hour. Let's go.
Having broken the sub 1 hour barrier was a major accomplishment, but this run was far from perfect. Headstrong got back to work and eventually lowered the record down to a 59:37 on July 28th. We mentioned earlier that one of the things unlocked by watching the Red Sage cutscene was the gondola to Snowy Mountain. This gondola is pretty slow. Riding up the mountain takes about 35 seconds, and 30 seconds to come back down. A runner named the Sexy Saxman, or Saxman for short, discovered that you can use Flut Flut to jump over the death plane of Snowy Mountain by the gondola, and dive down into Volcanic Crater from Snowy Mountain. By not having to take the gondola back down, players were able to save 25 seconds. Saxman would use this trick to snag the world record for themselves with the 59:26 on August 19th. Headstrong took the record back a few days later with the 59:18. By the end of August, the record was down to a 58:50. This time would later be tied by Weiji Shi on October 7th. Weiji's co-world record status would expire a week later when Headstrong improved the record to a 58:37. Headstrong had taken on the mantle of being the driving force pushing the world record. You can tie her, you might even beat her, but she's definitely going to beat you. By Christmas, she got a 57:43. From sniping the world record from Bill to being the undisputed any percent champ, Headstrong had solidified she was the real deal. 2016 started off, as many years do, with many speedrunners heading off to AGDQ 2016. This included many of the Jak speedrunning community, who would scurry off to Herndon, Virginia for a week. There were a few who couldn't attend, and those few accidentally discovered Backward Cell and Claw Skip.
There's a level called Mountain Pass that connects like the second major area to the third one. And when you drive through it the first time, there's a cell that you can't actually get normally. The way to unlock it is that you have to go to Snowy Mountain and unlock a yellow eco vent that lets you shoot fireballs, and then you can break a rock and go and pick it up afterwards. But that means going through the level twice. So something that we tried for a long time was just to get there on foot, because it was possible to walk through the level on foot. It was just kind of slow. Being able to jump up, there was like this one ledge, right? That if we could jump up it, it would make walking through it like 30 seconds faster than it was before. Because it was already known that you could walk through and pick it up. It just took forever and it wouldn't have been worth it. But if you could jump up this one ledge that was really high, then it would work. And I kind of just grinded it a bunch and got lucky once. I didn't have much proof of it, but I ended up convincing, Bill Braid and Goofy to try it, and Goofy managed to figure out exactly what made it work.
Claw's the boss in Rock Village, and he's surrounded by lava. You have to beat Claw in order to progress through the game. However, there was another trick that the community had known about since 2013 that was irrelevant, but would prove pivotal for skipping Claw. The trick is known as Lava Walk. While it was believed at the time that the hitbox for the lava was tied to its raising and lowering animation, it's more so based on how the PS2 attempts to check nearby polygons for collision. Either way, there's currently no known way for the player to control or manipulate it. If you grab the ledge within a certain frame window that is varying constantly, you can grab onto the ledge and not die in the lava. You can then let go of the ledge and walk in the lava, directly passing Claw. While the ledge grab was found by Pickleberry, the lava walk itself was found by Bloppy. Qatar tested over 1,100 different frames and never found a pattern. While not inherently difficult, the trick was frustrating because of how incredibly random it was. After returning from AGDQ, Headstrong got back to work lowering the record over the next few months. First with the 5730 on February 3rd, then a 5726 on February 15th. On March 2nd, Headstrong started a no reset run. Headstrong leaves the splits up for Geyser Rock just to make sure that the timer starts, but then after that, she hides her splits. Headstrong is a solid early game, with decent RNG fishing and Eco Plant fight. With a few close calls on the Zeppelins and on Misty Island, Headstrong clears Hub 1 with ease. She has a pretty good Lost Precursor City, except for a small section where she takes damage. After a great boggy swamp, Headstrong gets Lava Walk to skip Claw. Spider Cave, Snowy Mountain, and Lava Tube all go off without a hitch. It all came down to the final fight. The bad news is that Headstrong lost time on this fight, but it was still a PB. The final time, 56:35, a 49-second improvement.
The 56:35 was kind of like the culmination of all of the years prior. That was probably what I would consider to be like my own like peak game like time of when I was playing. So we thought that 56 might be possible at the time, but it wasn't really something I was thinking about. And so that run was a run I was doing. It was a no reset run with the splits hidden. So I had no clue what the pace was of that run. I wasn't trying to get anything near that. My plan, I was just trying to get lower 57, maybe 56. And then that run just came out of the blue from a no reset run and just blew everything away.
This run was unexpected. Headstrong saved time on almost every single split, only losing more than a second on the final split. While everyone knew a 56-minute time was possible, Headstrong wasn't actively grinding for it. This was supposed to be a no reset run after all. The whole idea of a no reset is to practice and play through the game. This is a prime example of what separated Headstrong from everyone else. This was the peak of Headstrong's Jak and Daxter speedrunning tenure. Before we go any further, we have to take a brief detour. The game has come a long way since the days of Ben Fictor's perfect run that could never be beaten. The game has been bent pretty far, but never broken. There weren't any major sequence breaks to speak of. Most of what had been found were ways to skip cutscenes. The game encouraged exploration and free movement between areas within the hub world, but it separated each hub with a power cell requirement. As a brief refresher, these requirements are 4 power cells in Geyser Rock, 20 power cells to get through Fire Canyon, 45 power cells to move the boulder, and 72 power cells to get through Lava Tube to reach the Citadel. In Bonesaw's 11334 run, we talked about Boulder Skip, which would skip the cutscene of Kira moving the flaming boulder. While this technically removed the 45 power cell requirement, it didn't really matter because runners still needed to collect the 72 power cells to get through Lava Tube. This reduced Boulder Skip to little more than a cutscene skip. At one point, Roser made a video saying that Lava Tube Skip would never be found.
I spent a long time trying to skip Lava Tube by just running up it. There are certain places in Lava Tube that you can stand without taking damage, and you can roll like between these if you take like one hit of damage, and then you can make it to the next place. So I made it to about halfway through. In the video, I actually say that I got further than I did. And so, yeah, I think I've got this far, but you can't get any further because this bit here damages you. And you got to go through this huge bit without taking any damage. You can't pick up health in Lava Tube. There's no enemies to kill. Not like any out of bounds were found in Lava Tube either. So I said, Lava Tube skip is impossible.
There are 2 golden rules when talking about speedrunners. Never say that a time won't be beaten, and never say that a skip won't be found. As time went on, more and more cracks were starting to show. Years after Roser's video, a non-RTA viable version of Lava Tube skip was discovered by Headstrong, Qatar, and Bloppy on January 22nd, 2016. Usually, stepping in the lava in Lava Tube would cause Jak to take damage. Since Lava Tube is pretty long and Jak can only take 4 hits before he dies, it wasn't possible to tank your way through it. Throughout Lava Tube, however, there are spots on the ground where the lava doesn't burn you. These are called cold spots. It's possible to jump to various cold spots before you reach a point of no return inside Lava Tube. By using the out of bounds originally used for the old Red Sage cutscene skip, you could ledge grab the edge of the Lava Tube without taking damage. You can jump from ledge to ledge throughout the first section of Lava Tube while only taking 1 damage. Navigating to this point from the beginning would usually cause the player to take 2 damage. Saving 1 damage allowed exploration on foot further than anyone had been able to attempt previously. As it turned out, there are more cold spots behind this lava flow that the player could just barely reach. One of these cold spots can only be reached by doing a scout fly boosted uppercut. It's just possible to reach the next cold spot with this boosted. Being able to just barely climb up the lava flow leads you to the final nail in the coffin for this skip. The hardest part of this skip was the roll jump required to get stuck in the archway. First, you need to do it right on the edge of a cold spot, which opens you up to being damaged if you aren't close enough, or not making the jump if you're too far away from the edge. Second, there's a rock sticking out of the right wall which will kill any and all momentum you have if you hit it. The roll jump requires you to get pretty close, or else you won't make it. Because the game doesn't have any forward dead zone, any slight variance in the position of your analog stick will give you a wildly different roll jump. Lastly, when landing inside the archway, you need to lose enough momentum to be able to zoom in, or else you'll slide off. Getting to the place where you could perform the roll jump would be difficult enough, but then the roll jump just made the whole ordeal nearly impossible for a single segment speedrun. To this day, nobody has ever done this method RTA. The closest anyone has come is Headstrong, who did the trick in 2 segments. Ultimately, the final piece of the puzzle to make this trick RTA viable was discovered by accident. In many games, if the player doesn't do anything, the character in the game either gets impatient or tired. Every time Jak does this animation, it essentially refreshes the level. When it refreshes, it checks the level you're in and your checkpoint. It does this when you respawn, watch a cutscene, or after idling. To put it bluntly, interrupting the idle animation breaks the entire game. This trick is a little complicated. Essentially, there are stored checkpoints and there are stored levels. The game checks what level you're in and then sees which checkpoint you last reached. If you were able to get and store a checkpoint in an area different than the level the game has stored for you, what would happen? Headstrong found this by accident because her pause button was broken. One day, when sitting in Rock Village, Jak started his idle animation. Headstrong then went over to Precursor Basin to try and practice pause buffering. Headstrong practiced for so long that Jak idled and Precursor Basin disappeared and completely unloaded. When Headstrong respawned, she was back in Rock Village. Let's walk through what happened. For idle deloads to work, you need a current checkpoint and a stored level. The game's current stored level was Rock Village. Interrupting the idle animation meant that the game hadn't stored a new checkpoint. It didn't know that Headstrong went to Precursor Basin. Because the game thinks the last place you were was in Rock Village, that's where the game puts you. Interrupting the idle animation can be performed with a zoom, a punch, or a spin, but it's easiest to perform a pause buffer. This trick is called idle deload, and it has a few implications. You could do a slightly slower but much more consistent version of claw skip. Instead of lava walk, you could go to where claw is to store the level, and then make your way to Boggy Swamp. There is a part far enough in Boggy Swamp where you are technically closer to the checkpoint behind Claw than the checkpoint in front of him. Wait 28.5 seconds for the idle animation and then pause buffer. Jak will fall into the void and die. The game knows the last place it stored a level was in the Claw area, but since you are technically closer to the checkpoint after Claw, that's where it puts you. Qatar then thought, I wonder if I could work this into lava tube skip now.
When I was like trying to figure this out, I already had in my mind like how can I like use this useful in a useful way. I'm already like was thinking of like lava tube skip at the time. So as soon as I understood those 3 points, I instantly went to lava tube to test it out. I didn't like do like the whole skip, but I just cheated my way into like getting checkpoint and stuff like to make it like faster. I realized that it was possible, and then when I realized that it was possible, I tried to go back and try it again and again, so I could figure out how close I had to go to the second checkpoint to be able to like make it. And that's where I found like exactly the spot that we use now to make the reload one.
Walking into Lava Tube will leave you with the checkpoint of being in Lava Tube. You can go into Lava Tube via out of bounds. You stand still out of bounds to get an idle animation. This stores the level as Lava Tube. Navigating your way back to Volcanic Crater, you want to get a new checkpoint for Volcanic Crater while keeping your stored level as Lava Tube. Because you're out of bounds, you can avoid getting the checkpoint for Lava Tube. Then, you can make your way further into Lava Tube so you're closer to the second checkpoint in the level than the first one. If you perform an idle deload here, the game checks to see which level is stored and reloads the level. Then, it checks your last checkpoint. Because the checkpoint is in Volcanic Crater and not in Lava Tube, the game is going to give the player a new checkpoint, based on which checkpoint is the closest. Since Jak is a little more than halfway between the first and second checkpoint, Jak's checkpoint is updated to be the later one in Lava Tube. Dying here will allow the player to respawn at the second checkpoint. This was it. This was the trick that eluded players for years. This was the holy grail of Jak and Daxter speedrunning. This was Lava Tube skip.
I really didn't even think that Qatar had it in him even, maybe, to find something as major as Lava Tube skip. I feel like anything that he found prior was of medium size, small sized, but nothing large scale like this, you know, like this was the holy grail. You know, we wanted to solve this mystery of Lava Tube skip, and I really never would have expected Qatar to be that guy. Completely hit the smoke screen, silent assassin style, and just completely, within the span of 2 days, just managed to drop a bombshell of a finding, you know. The amount of stuff that he did, he took the fundamentals of what was found for Lava Tube skip beforehand and made it possible in the most insane reveal possible for the community. I mean, it was huge.
Lava Tube skip meant that players no longer had to collect 72 power cells to beat the game. You only needed to collect 20 power cells now to get through Fire Canyon. You could then skip moving the boulder with boulder skip, skip claw with the new idle deload method, skip Lava Tube with idle deload, and then skip almost all of the citadel with a pause buffer to reach the final boss. Any cutscenes in between could be skipped with pause buffering. Now all that was left was to get it all in a run.
Dude, it's crazy. I will say, I will defend this. Lava Tube skip is the best thing that ever happened to this game. As far as like routing goes and like all this stuff, and like we have so many categories now that are great categories that are literally only exist and are like a unique thing because of this one skip. It opens up the game so much because the final barrier that you have to cross is just gone.
The first time that the ledge grabs were completed on console, Headstrong was listening to Highway to Hell by AC/DC. It's just one of those moments in history that scored perfectly. A few days later, Guitar and Headstrong had started a race to see who could get it in a run first. The first completed speedrun to ever have lava tube skip would be a 1:51:15 on June 23rd by Headstrong. Later that same stream, Headstrong got the first ever world record run with lava tube skip.
That's like 38 though. Damn. Wow. That's better.
37:43. Over 18 minutes of time save. This run was far from optimized, but what a sight it was. Something beyond the wildest dreams of the community for so long.
The 37:43 was definitely the big one in regards to just everything happening. All of our practice and stuff kind of culminated to that. Me and Qatar were spending hours upon hours just working on trying to get the ledge grabs to work properly and figuring out what the best way is to tackle them. Because at the time, the Scout Fly Boosted was considered too difficult. After all those hours of practice, I got it on console, and then Qatar got it on console. And we decided, after we were both getting it a little bit more here and there, to just do a race until someone finished the game with the skip. And then that finally happened. It was great. Even that run itself, even though it was terrible, almost 2 hours long, was still super hype of just like actually finishing a run with lava tube skip. It actually being a thing. And then I want to say an hour-ish later, I got the 37:43.
I remember I was at my summer job. Headstrong gets the first, she gets like a 37 or something. Just gets the first world record with lava tube skip. And I remember I saw it. I just saw that it happened. I didn't even watch it yet. And I remember I just like stopped what I was doing at work and I just like called her on Skype off of my phone in like the middle of the woods in Minnesota to just be like, yo, congrats.
2 days later, Headstrong lowered the record down to a 28:56. The first time Jak and Daxter had ever been completed in under 30 minutes. Like a knife through hot butter, the record was quite literally just cut in half. But the community wasn't through with any percent just yet. Bobby Kaze would take the world record on July 8th by incorporating Scout Fly boosted extended uppercuts. This is a boosted off of a Scout Fly crate, which was used in the non-RTA viable version of lava tube skip. For a long time, it wasn't even known that you could perform a boosted this low to the ground. I Am Grig found a setup for it that allowed Bobby to replace the ledge grabs. After taking the record back in early July with a 27:25, Headstrong went on a PB spree from July through September, lowering the record down from a 27:25 to 25:25. While Lava Walk had been taken out of the run for a much more consistent trick, Headstrong had started adding it back in to help drive the time lower. Ouija had been a world record contender for quite a while, even tying the world record back when it was a 58:50. Ouija wasn't only a great Jak 1 runner, but had previously held the world record in Jak 2 as well. This was Ouija's time to shine, and on September 21st, Ouija had finally snagged the brass ring with a 25:22, an untied world record. But Headstrong was streaming when she found out that Ouija had taken the record, so she just started doing attempts of any percent. 5 hours later, Headstrong had hit Ouija hard with the clapback, a 25:13.
Ouija has been around for quite some time too. At this point in time, it was really it was me, Jazz, Ouija, and Bobby who were doing anything with lava tube skip. Ouija was trying really hard, trying to push through it, and finally Ouija got a good run going, beat me by 3 seconds, and then it was probably like 5 hours later that I PB'd and beat Ouija, and I felt so bad.
Headstrong would continue to lower the time all the way down to 24:57, the first sub 25. Like Bill Braid before her, Headstrong had been the runner out in front, implementing all of the skips and time saves into the run for nearly 2 years. It wasn't just the 10-hour streams of attempts, or the late-night Discord calls working on tricks. It was implementing this lead in an ever-changing landscape. There are incredibly few people who can say that they were able to hold the record when the run was over an hour and when the run was under half an hour. Headstrong is one of them. By the end of it all, it was simply time for her to step aside. The game had taken its toll, and Headstrong decided to end the grind.
So after the 24:57, I was so burnt out on Jak. I wanted to move on, do other things, work on other games. I wanted to get under 25 once I knew it was possible, and then once I got that, I just wanted to be done. I was still having fun playing the game, but it was becoming harder for me to grind out runs, to want to continue to really try and push it. Even to this day, honestly, I can't play Jak 1 for very long. I really burnt myself out during that whole stretch.
Towards the end of 2015, a Discord would be created for Jak and Daxter speedruns. With a new place to call home, old and new runners alike migrated to this safe haven. By the end of 2016, the community was well over 100 runners strong. One of those speedrunners was Outrageous Josh. Outrageous Josh started speedrunning Jak and Daxter towards the end of 2014, happy to play offline and not record his gameplay. By 2015, Josh had graduated from offline runs to the potato cam. By the time 2016 rolled around, Josh had already held world records in Orbless and 100%. He was more than capable of championing the game.
Yeah, Josh came in very strong into the community, and he's part of the reason why the community has grown so much that it has, because again, he's just charismatic. Like, if you watch any of his streams and he's just always laughing to things that are going on. He will always say things like "what the frick" instead of like actually swearing, and it's just adorable. And yeah, he came in strong with, like you said, a well-practiced movement. I think I actually said earlier, you need to put the grind in. And again, Josh is one of those people that did.
At the same time, Sir Jazzberry had recently returned to the Any% fold, and he was pretty damn good. Jazz had previously sniped the world record from Bill Braid when Red Sage cutscene skip was discovered. Jazz had been around for a while, watching from the sidelines as others went on to achieve dozens of world records. Jazz decided he wanted to throw in with the rest of them. Josh would be the first to grab the world record following Headstrong's absence, with a 24:46 on December 9th, 2016.
Oh my god! Oh my god! I have legitimate tears in my eyes. Oh my god.
This record has one of the most legendary speedrun YouTube comment threads ever, and you should check the thread for yourself if you have the time. While Jazz had felt like he was doing everything right, he was still coming up short. Despite doing the same tricks and skips as Headstrong and Josh, Jazz's PB was around 25:40. No matter what he did, he just didn't seem able to catch them. It wasn't until AGDQ 2017 that Jazz had a revelation on why that might be.
I was actually struggling a lot. So this entire time, I had been... okay. The next thing that I do is go to AGDQ 2017. And this whole time, from me learning the game to this point, I had been playing. I didn't know this was a big deal. I had been playing on some old, ratty HD TV on a PlayStation 2, right? And then I went to HDQ 2017, and you go in the practice room, or like the casual room, I think it was, and there's CRTs everywhere. And you're like, okay, cool. I started I was struggling because it seemed like even with Lava Walk, like even with doing Lava Walk and doing all the good strats for any percent, which I was doing in 2016, I could only get like, the best I could do was like 25-40. I was like losing a minute to Headstrong and Josh. I was like, what? I couldn't see it. I was like, dude, where are they? What is this? Like, how are they beating me by so much? It was really frustrating. I go to GDQ and there's all these CRTs. I plug in my PlayStation 2, right? And it's like, I'm just playing, right? And then I PB by a little bit, just on a random setup, and I haven't played in a few days. And I'm like, well, that run was bad. How did I PB by like 3 seconds? What it was is I didn't realize that I was playing with a ton of input delay.
Having acquired a CRT, time was melting off Jazz's runs left and right. Jazz had found what was keeping him from contending for the world record, and now all that was left was to put in the work. On February 21st, 2017, Jazz had done it. He had reclaimed the world record for the first time since 2015 with a time of 24:43. His previous reign was only 2 days, but surely this time would be... Oh. The very next day, Josh improved his PB by 6 seconds and subsequently lowered the world record to a 24:40. It didn't matter to Jazz that his time at the top wasn't for very long. It was about the climb. Content that he had accomplished what he set out to do, Jazz moved on from any percent. Jazz is gone now. Oh well. Headstrong's days of grinding the record for hours upon hours at a time were behind her, but there was nothing stopping her from the odd attempt here and there. On June 27th, Headstrong was on a pretty good run when this happened.
I split that early, but we'll see what that was. It might have been a 41. It might have been we'll find out.
Bad luck, right? Eventually, on July 13th, this happened.
Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I'm gonna get a 40. I'm gonna get a 24:40, unless I get God Spawn, in which case it's 39. Oh my god. No. No.
Well, that's just unlucky. Josh broke the tie on September 12th with a 24:34. Josh was losing interest in any percent because of how painful the category was becoming. With categories such as no lava tube skip on the rise, Josh left to lower that record down to a 56:13 by the end of the year. Oh hey, Jazz is back. Jazz had been playing a few different categories in Jak 1 after putting any percent down. Jazz eventually returned to any percent. Without the input delay that served as a handicap for all those years to slow him down, Jazz got back into world record shape in no time. On January 27th, 2018, Jazz got a 24:30, a 4-second improvement over Josh's time.
I was so happy to see Jazz up there finally, because Jazz was always either right behind me or right behind Josh. Or right there just constantly for years, and then Jazz finally got his time in the spotlight for a while.
In one of the only instances of the game's history, there were 2 runners who were equally good enough to be on top. This was confirmed a month to the day later when Josh also got a 24:30 on February 27th.
Oh frick, I got it. I just tied Jazz. That was a 30.
Josh was currently working towards a world record sweep of all categories, so returning to any percent was inevitable. Jazz and Josh agreed to an armistice. Neither of them wanted the strain and stress that pushing any percent would cause, so the two both agreed to let sleeping dogs lie. This category is unforgiving at every stage. The margin for error is phenomenally little. During this break, a YouTuber named Donkey Planet found a way to activate the game's debug mode with memory manipulation on emulator. Just having access to it on emulator wasn't good enough though. The community needed it to work on PS2. Jak and Daxter scientist Luminar Light brute forced the button sequence by mapping all of the inputs to one button and spamming it. With confirmation that it worked on console, Qatar, and later Vaser systematically found the debug code. By inputting this sequence of buttons, players can access debug mode. The most important thing to know about debug mode is it gave runners a way to consistently practice the harder tricks in the game. Until now, runners would need to have a save file in Spider Cave to practice lava tube skip. Jak always respawns with 3 health, and you need 4 to do lava tube skip. There is no health in Volcanic Crater, so if you die practicing lava tube skip and respawn, you have to go somewhere else to get health. Now with the debug mode, players could give themselves health at any time. So if you failed the boosted on the scout fly box, just fly up into the air, give yourself more health and retry. An often underrated component of speedrunning is practice. For tricks like lava tube skip, practice was a long and arduous process. Not only could you practice it much faster, you could practice each part on its own. While the grind had worn him down, Jazz had the better part of a year to reflect on the category. At the end of the day, Jazz loved any percent. He loved the route. He loved the category. No matter what else happened, Jazz would always return to any percent. He cared too much to move on and never look back. Now armed with the new, easy way to practice, Jazz was able to hone his craft. While he had taken a step away from the game, his skills were as sharp as ever. It was only a matter of time before Jazz returned to any percent.
After Lava Tube Skip got discovered and Headstrong had pushed the record down as low as she could get it, it was very apparent to me that Josh was going to be the one to take it that next step further. And when Josh got it, I remember the record kind of fell into a bit of a stalemate. Like there wasn't really anybody trying. But you know, as we all know, like in the background, like Jazz is kind of channeling this energy to be ready to play the game again. And when October 2018 hit, I'd say we probably got the greatest rivalry we've ever seen in the entire series of Jak and Daxter. Josh versus Jazz was like a thing of beauty for sure.
Both me and Jazz at the beginning of 2018 had a 24-30 in any percent, right? And both of us had kind of decided to just leave it there, right? We were satisfied that we both, had a tied record in any percent. Until Jazz decided, you know what, it's time. And so all the way in October, he decides, you know what, I'm going to get this record. And so he does it. And so I see him do that, and I'm like, okay, cool, I guess I'm back too, right? And, chaos ensued from there. It was very much a friendly competition. We both were having a lot of fun with it. I know that. Well, at a certain point, I was not having fun anymore.
And return he did in October of 2018. In a classic case of cause and effect, Josh also came back to any percent. Josh wasn't no slouch either. His skill was also enhanced by debug mode. Gone were the days of massive gold splits and reroutes. What little time was left to squeeze from the category would not be given easily. It was going to be a slog, but both knew that there was gold left in them there hills. This is one of the greatest rivalries of modern speedrunning.
So stupid. Why are we beating it by a second at a time?
Both runners were streaming attempts for 8 to 10 hours at a time. The resets on Geyser Rock were innumerable. The near misses midway into this 24-minute jaunt were plentiful. The dread that accompanied each passing attempt was foreboding. It was enough that Josh considered calling it quits before the end of the month.
Josh is messaging me, like having like a meltdown or something, man. He's like, he is about to give up. Just like he's about to just give up on this category because grinding it has been like otherworldly brutal on him. And myself too. This was a pretty ridiculous category. And he was about to give up. And if you think of Josh now, you don't like, that's not something that would even occur to you that he would even think about doing, is giving up on a run, like giving up on a category. But he persisted. I was like, you know, man, don't do anything ridiculous. Like, keep yourself good, man. Like, if you need to break, then break. Like, don't hurt, like destroy yourself or anything by just running this thing into the ground and just bashing your head against a wall forever.
Josh kept pressing on though. Jazz and Josh knew that while sub 2410 was possible, it would likely take a little bit more work to get it. After being repeatedly knocked off the horse for almost an entire month, Josh mounted up once again. After all, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's about how many times you get back up. On October 25th, 2018, Josh continued the grind. Yes, that is a bunk bed. Today's stream hasn't been too bad. All world records start with a good Geyser Rock. A few small mistakes have him a little concerned. After a dodgy tower climb, Josh barely resists the urge to reset the run. Josh's splits are pretty fricked by this point, but he is playing well enough to keep going. After collecting power cell number 20, Josh heads to Fire Canyon. Josh finds himself at Claw 7 seconds ahead of PB, but the run doesn't start until he hits Lava Walk. He's already hit it 3 times today. Make that 4 times today. Lava Tube has killed its fair share of runs, but Josh doesn't blink. The Scout Fly boosted uppercut doesn't even scare him anymore. He's been here too many times. He has no fear. Josh's streams are always lighthearted and fun. He's one of the most positive speedrunners you could watch. Even he is dialed in heading to the final fight. The chat is going nuts. Josh can hardly keep it together. The final time, 24:07. It's real. He did it.
Oh my god! I can't. I freaking did it! I freaking did it! I freaking did it! Oh my god! Oh my god! 24:08! I freaking did it! I freaking did it! Oh my god, I did it! Oh my god! I actually did it! This is real! This is real, guys! Look at this! This is real! 24:08, it's real! It's not hypothetical, that is real!
That was perhaps one of the greatest Jack players of all time in Jazzberry, who was perhaps at his most motivated of all time, and Josh still managed to beat him. That, to me, goes to show how insane Josh is of a player. And I really think that record, the 24:07, I really think that's when he leveled up. I really think that's when he, got to Super Saiyan 3 completely. I mean, that's the turning point for when Josh became the sensei, the absolute master of his craft and of Jak 1. Just completely the greatest to ever play the game, period.
Josh said it himself. He killed any percent. As the old saying goes, you can't draw blood from a stone. Any percent was bone dry of new time save, and it was a drain on runners to continue going the way they were. If you were willing to throw a few hundred hours at the problem, you might be rewarded with another second or two of time save. It was only after reroutes of Geyser Rock and Forbidden Jungle that anything more than a second came off the time. Was there even anything left? Players were already able to skip most of the power cell requirements in the game. Players no longer needed 72 power cells to complete the game, only 20 power cells to get through Fire Canyon. Saving any more time would require another sequence break. And wouldn't you know it, that's just what they found. A new trick would be discovered and performed RTA for the first time before the end of 2018. This was the last major hurdle that needed to be cleared. This was Fire Canyon Skip. Ordinarily, the player collected 20 power cells so they could upgrade the heat shield on the zoomer and cross Fire Canyon with relative ease. Fire Canyon is filled with flaming rocks and lava. Touching them doesn't just damage you though, it also bounces you back towards the entrance of Fire Canyon. Bobby Kaze had found that you could get out of bounds and then do 9 minutes of blind ledge grabs along the death plane of Fire Canyon. It's blind in both the sense that you sometimes can't see what you're doing and in the sense that the ledge you're grabbing is invisible. This should go without saying, but this method was not RTA viable. Okay, so doing 100 blind ledge grabs is out of the question, so what else do we have? Eventually, a new version of Fire Canyon Skip would be discovered. When Jak respawns after death or loads in from a save file, Jak does not have the state that triggers the safeguard that bounces Jak backwards in Fire Canyon. This state is only applied to Jak from walking around the entrance to Fire Canyon. When Jak lands after jumping, it takes 3 frames to update Jak's grounded state. By jumping within this 3-frame window repeatedly, you can prevent the game from applying the state which triggers the Fire Canyon safeguard. This trick, discovered by Qatar, is called ground cancel jumps. This is the method that everyone uses today. But there's another problem. Every time that Jak bounces, he loses health, so shouldn't he die once he gets to 0? Well, not exactly. Jak can only die once he hits solid ground, so as long as he stays bouncing, Jak can't die. You could theoretically bounce forever.
For 99% of Fire Canyon, Jak has 0 health, but you can still control him. He's just looking for a place to die. So yeah, once Jak finds a place to die, that's it, because you get teleported right back to the beginning of Fire Canyon. So you have to get through all of Fire Canyon without being attracted by any objects. And that comes with some difficulties.
So Jak is dead but can't die, magnetized to anything vaguely resembling solid matter. Once you get through Fire Canyon, Jak's body will be burnt to a crisp, and once he touches the ground at the end of the level, Jak will die. By turning the camera before Jak hits the ground, the camera's hitbox will be at the end of Fire Canyon, which triggers a checkpoint at the end. Skipping Fire Canyon meant that runners no longer had to get 20 power cells. Players were now only required to get the 4 power cells to leave Geyser Rock, and then they could skip everything up until the final boss at the end of the Citadel. There was just one problem. Nobody wanted to try Fire Canyon Skip. Runner Luigi was the only one who tried to go for Fire Canyon Skip at all, which isn't all that surprising when you consider how Luigi entered the community.
So first I want to note about Luigi. Luigi had been running, he had been in the community for a little while, and he started, the category that he started with was any percent, which at the time we strongly advised that people did not do that. Because Lava Tube Skip is going to, like, you're going to be better at it and you're going to learn it faster if you already have a very strong grasp of the fundamentals of the game. That's just kind of how the skip is. And we would strongly advise against running any percent first. We would be like, no, do no LTS or 100%. Those are the 2 best ones to start with. And when we just said, no, I'm going to do any percent. And for a little while, he did it. He did it. And props to him for doing that. I mean, his movement wasn't pretty, and it wasn't pretty for a while, but my man stuck it through, and he did any percent, and he did Lava Tube Skip, and he did pretty well.
While almost everyone was at AGDQ 2019, Luigi did not attend. Instead of going to GDQ, he was at home streaming attempts on Twitch. In support of Luigi, the Jak community gathered together to watch Luigi stream on their phones, cheering him on from the event. On the second day of AGDQ, Luigi got a run with Fire Canyon Skip. It was still going to be a foot race, but this was the moment that Luigi was working towards. In the end, he wasn't disappointed, and neither were the people at AGDQ.
Oh my god.
My baby Josh is dead.
Josh is gone. A prank, dude.
A prank.
Oh, that's a shitty spawn.
Yeah.
Holy shit!
Yes.
What the fuck?
Yes.
Hell yeah.
No way.
What? That's
Let's
nutty,
go.
dude.
What? Look at this boy recording a phone with a phone.
Nice. Holy shit.
Luigi had done it. Luigi was the first person to do Fire Canyon Skip in an any percent world record, with a time of 22:51.
It definitely threw a curveball at all of us. A very cool curveball, but a curveball nonetheless. It was a very exciting moment for all of us. I think. Obviously, we didn't want like any percent to be dead forever, but we also didn't think. We didn't even know Luigi was learning Fire Canyon Skip. We didn't even know until he pulls out this run, you know? And so, like, we are very excited that, you know, the game is starting a new era. But, well, I guess in that moment, that's where the excitement's at. You know? The excitement is all there, and then there comes a realization, like, okay, wait, this is real. We have to learn this, right? And so that is kind of where the pain comes in.
Jazz was inspired to run any percent again after seeing Fire Canyon Skip make its way into the run. Jazz spent the rest of AGDQ practicing the route in the casual room. It was only weeks previous that nobody wanted to even attempt Fire Canyon Skip at all, and now Jazz was spending the majority of his vacation practicing for it.
If we wanted to find Jazz, he was at a TV practicing Fire Canyon Skip. It super motivated Jazz.
I spent the rest of the week, I don't know how long I spent practicing. And this was not pretty. This was, I spent, oh my god, I don't even want to think about how many hours I spent just bouncing in Fire Canyon in the GDQ practice room, or like casual room or wherever. It was to the point where I was like, Headstrong would be like, yo, Jazz, we're gonna go eat. And I'd be like, no, I'm staying here. Like, and yeah, that's the point where it was like an obsession for like 8 days.
Jazz couldn't wait to get home and start doing more runs. A few days after getting home from AGDQ, Jazz got a great run going. Jazz lowered the world record to 1932 on January 16, 2019, the first time anyone had beaten Jak and Daxter in under 20 minutes. Jazz is the only person to have had the world record before Lava Tube Skip, before Fire Canyon Skip, and after Fire Canyon Skip. Jazz cemented his place in the history books and was happy to watch from the sidelines. Josh came back to run any percent at the end of January. He knew he had his work cut out for him. What follows is perhaps one of the most impressive displays of individual effort in all speedrunning history. If you're wondering what separates Josh from everyone else, you need not look any further.
16. Is this 1647? I'm just gonna punch to wherever it's at. Dude. I'm not gonna roll jump. Oh, it's a 45. Woo! Yes! 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 Let's freaking go! Let's go, dude! We freaking did it!
So that month that drove Josh absolutely mad, he pulled a me and was doing like 8-10 hour days of just Fire Canyon skip runs. Of just, I don't know how he did that. That would have been so painful. It was painful for me just finishing the one run that I did.
3 people had completed a run of any percent since the inclusion of Fire Canyon Skip: Josh, Jazz, and Luigi. Luigi's PB had stayed put at 22:51. Jazz's PB was still 19:32. Josh's PB was 16:45, nearly 3 minutes faster than second place and more than 6 minutes faster than third place. Josh didn't put a pin in any percent, he put a damn railroad spike in it. In the 14 months after, nobody came within a minute of Josh. This was the longest a world record time had stood unopposed or untied since 2009. Unlike Zenic Reverie's 140.11 though, there didn't seem like there was a whole lot that could be improved. But every time you think the giving tree has nothing left to give you, it finds a new gift to give. A ray of light broke through the veil of darkness in the form of a power cell cutscene skip on Geyser Rock. There was only one other known power cell animation that could be skipped, and that was in Snowy Mountain. Snowy Mountain wasn't exactly in the route anymore. It was theorized by HS Blue but discovered by Six Rock Fire that you could skip this one on Geyser Rock. By June 2020, Josh had the itch to go back to old habits. Maybe he had been cooped up for so long that even any percent was starting to look good to him. It was 2020 after all. Regardless of his reasons, Josh returned to put an exclamation point on his reign of dominance over Jak 1. Josh got a 16:35 on June 6th.
Let's go! I needed that one so bad. I needed that one. Because of those new things, I felt kind of obligated to show them in a world record. To at least, say that, hey, this run can be pushed further. And that's kind of the bad part about it. This run, the 1635 can definitely be pushed lower. I can probably go under 1620, realistically, yes. But this category is so painful. It's gone so far. It's wild.
Months would pass before anyone would dare to face off against this run. But if history has taught us anything, no run can stand forever. On January 10th, 2021, a familiar face dusts off the old PlayStation and boots up Jak and Daxter. After a serviceable Geyser Rock, Jak emerges from Fire Canyon burnt to a crisp, but still on pace with their PB. Boulder Skip, Lava Walk, and Mountain Pass could have gone better, but this runner had an ace up their sleeve. In their last run, they made a costly slip-up when bypassing the checkpoint in Lava Tube Skip. This time, they had an insane 21.5 second time save waiting for them as they cleared the trick with ease. After skipping almost the entirety of the Citadel, they find themselves standing toe-to-toe with history. Who was it, you might ask? Was it Headstrong, whose preceding reign of dominance covered the better part of 2 years? She had been known to do the odd attempt now and then, after all. What about an upset? Did Luigi return to any percent? He was a trailblazer in his own right. There's also always Josh, who's had a stranglehold on almost every single category since 2018. Did Josh come back for one last hurrah? Before we answer that question, let's take a quick peek behind the curtain. On January 9th, the night before this run, we were recording an interview to appear in the video. Our editor, CJ It's All Good, was doing interviews for the video when this happened.
I mean, I've been playing any percent again for these past few days. So I might snag the world record back from Josh, potentially. I mean, I'm not really like grinding a lot. I'm just kind of, vibing and playing around. Fire Canyon Stick's kind of fun. It's kind of a vibe.
Less than 24 hours after that interview, Jazz completed a windmill dunk to the basket. Jazz was nearly 30 seconds ahead of their original PB. The final time was 16:27, an 8-second improvement to the any percent record. We mentioned before how much Jazz loves the game in this category. Despite never having a long-lasting reign, Jazz has held a world record in nearly every major era of the game.
But really what Jazz is to Jak is what a hero is to a small village almost. He's like the hero that travels the world and goes on his own personal journey. But like when his village needs him the most, which is in this case, the Jak community, when it needs him the most, he comes and saves the day. And he's done that multiple times in its lifespan.
So where do we go from here? Well, a new skip could always be discovered. Currently, there are 2 things that could be discovered, but they both have problems of their own. The first is a TAS-only strategy called Bridge Blast.
It seems a lot of people have kind of latched onto something called Bridge Blast, which theoretically could work, but it's very, very random and takes a long time to set up. Mainly because the game starts running at 1 FPS, so you got to play for about 2 minutes. 2 minutes of full time at 1 frame per second, so whatever that turns into, like 15 minutes.
It's also possible that runners might find a way to skip Geyser Rock's 4 power cell requirement, but that also seems unlikely at this time. A runner named The Stellar started running Jak 1 at the beginning of 2020 and is already on a really promising path. In January 2021, he became the second person to ever achieve a 16-minute time in any percent. If anyone new is going to take a run at the world record, it's very likely to be Stellar. Let's also not forget about Josh. Josh is focusing on destroying other categories at the moment, but he'll come back. He always comes back. Jak and Daxter began as the little speed game that could. Plagued by long, unskippable cutscenes and seemingly impregnable safeguards, Jak and Daxter gained speed. It was shaped by the runners who poured their hearts and souls into it. It was engineered by the time savers and the route finders who spent hours looking to save every single second. It was well kept by a community who loved their game with full hearts. Whether it's saving a few seconds on a new orb route or cutting the record in half with lava tube skip, one thing is for certain. If you decide to join the Jak and Daxter community, you won't regret it. Hey, thanks for watching our video. If you want to join the community, check out our Discord. Also, consider supporting us on Patreon. It really helps. Thanks.